Okay, so today we've got exercise 218. I know a lot of you lost what you were working on 217 when the power went out, so you didn't have to post anything for 217, though today's exercise is short enough to where you can redo 217 and finish this one all in one. It's not just a complete repeat of last Wednesday, but it is enough time to be able to do that as well. So I'm actually expecting the 217 renderings today in addition to the 218 unrolled surfaces. After today, you have all the skills necessary for assignment 203, right? It's 203? I think it's 203. So you should be good to go for that. Obviously the tower is a little bit taller, but it's basically the same stuff you've done in 215, 16, 17, and 18. Okay, so this next piece of unrolling surfaces is something that is incredibly useful whenever you go to build models. It's actually something that the digital fabrication class is using pretty extensively right now to build shapes. Rhino has the ability to unroll a lot of surfaces, which basically means if I had a three-dimensional object and I split it apart and folded it flat, what is the shape that's cut out? So I have a shape that looks like this right now. Oops, it's a skin of my building.
Or they actually have a sheet of paper that you can make a model.
Right, you cut it out of a sheet of paper and then you glue it together. I have some models. I'll go grab them after we go through it. Yeah, depending on the shape, okay. Yes and no. And so I'll show you the examples and hopefully that'll help. I'm going to go ahead and turn off right now the floors and the ceilings so that I have just my shape. And I can view it just in shaded mode so that we're looking at it kind of in its most basic form. And so in this particular object, this is a lot of, if you guys have taken 130 and you had the cube that was flat that you folded together, or the triangle that was flat that you folded together, it's the same kind of concept, the difference being that this can be a little bit more complicated. And so I'll do several examples for you to see the unroll surface in action, but I'm starting with the tower that I created that has the slight twist to it. This, theoretically, you could guess at, but it's a whole lot easier to actually unroll these surfaces. And so when I have a surface, the key is you want to make it a closed poly surface if you can, and make it have as few surfaces as you can. So in this case, I'm working with just the rectangular surface here, and it's actually a very simple process. Before I do it though, I want to make sure that I have a layer, and I usually call this unroll, and then I usually have a sub-layer for the actual unrolled surfaces. Alright, and I'm going to make that active, so it's my primary layer, so that what I unroll will show up on that layer. So then it's a matter of using the unroll surface command, and so it's under surface. I always type it, so I'm always lost as to where it is. Unroll developable surface, or unroll SRF, so unroll SRF. And it says select surface or polysurface to unroll. And there's a bunch of options that we want to pay attention to. Explode will make separate pieces for each surface. If you don't click explode and your surface overlaps on itself, you'll have nested surfaces that you can't actually cut out. So generally I leave it with explode yes. Generally I also turn labels to yes. So I clicked on labels to turn it to yes. Heat properties is fine as no, and relative tolerance is fine as the default. I'm going to go ahead and select this surface, and when I hit enter, it's going to label the tower and also label each of these pieces. Okay, so let's look at it in the top view for a second, and I'm going to move these pieces away from my tower like so. And now it's a matter of doing a little bit of organization. Okay, so let's spread these out a little bit. It did a pretty good job actually of kind of organizing for us and matching up sides. Move those away. Okay, so let's take 11 here. Do we have an 11 here? Yes, we do. Let me go ahead and move this from that endpoint to that endpoint. And then let me go ahead and rotate. From there to there and down to there. Okay? If I look here, I've got 3 on this side. This would be 3, but I can't attach, I can attach it like this, but it doesn't really do me any good because there's a split. So I'm actually going to rotate this, and this is somewhat dependent on the size of the object and the size of the laser cutter if you intend to actually laser cut it. I'm going to go ahead and fold it out that way. Okay. Likewise, 9 would fit up quite nicely right here. If I can type, which I can't. There. 6 is right there, so let's move this one. From there to there. That. Now we have one piece at the bottom here. It doesn't really matter where I choose to move this one. We can move it to the bottom here. And we'll go like that. So I've gone through it, I've labeled all those pieces, and I now have the unrolled, flattened version, right, of my object. And it's usually helpful to save and look at your original object with the labels on it so that you can see what side goes where, right? Not as big of a deal because this is a relatively simple shape, but if it was a more complicated shape, it would matter a little bit more, right? And so this works not only for those, simple rectangular shapes, but pretty much any shape that you can imagine. So let's say that and I'm creating these. All right, let's take this. Let me turn my points on. Move these vertical. Okay. Anytime I lock two surfaces together, even if they're complicated, that folded back on itself. Hold on a second. I need this fold, see how it folds back over itself? I need to make sure that doesn't happen, so hold on a second. Alright, much better. Okay, so I have something like this. I can unroll this surface. And it will make the component pieces, and this is why I like to put it on a new layer. I should have done it. Go right here a little bit. Those are my original curves. But we can see that even though it's a complicated twisting surface, I still get my individual shapes. And if I were to line them up, right, with side 6 and side 6, side 1 and side 1, we can end up, I might have two on top of each other. The point being that no matter what the shape is, as long as it's developable, you can actually do this. So let's get rid of this for a second. And let me build something, right, something like this. Right, works for any and all shapes. So something like this. I can also do an unroll surface, and I get each of the component pieces that I would need to glue it together. Right? Does that make some sense? Right? It's a pretty easy command. Now, sometimes you want a little bit more detail to unroll with your surfaces. And so let me come back to my skyscraper here, and I'm going to go ahead and delete a few of these pieces. And I'm going to get rid of the labels. Alright, so I'm back to just this piece. Now what I'd like is, I'd like for it to unroll all of the floors in addition to the shape itself. So before I got just the shape, the outline. I want every one of the individual floors. So I'm going to turn on the floor curves, or excuse me, they're just floors right now. Let me turn off the surfaces. Okay, and I have a whole bunch of these, but I need curves that go around each of these floors. So I'm going to use duplicate border, and I'm going to select all of my surfaces, and it's going to give me lines that go around each of those. Right? And I could even do a sublayer here. We could floor curves, and let's change object layer, and let's move this. This should have been down underneath there. Alright, and so each of these have a curve that goes around it. Okay, so when I do the unroll surface, I'm select curves on polysurface. Excuse me. Let's do unroll surface. Select surface or polysurface to unroll. So, oops, that's not what I wanted. I need this. Okay. Then it says select curves on polysurface to unroll. So I'm going to pick all of those curves that I just created, and I can do that rather quickly by dragging down. Okay. So all I did was I picked the curves that were around the outside. Okay. Now, when I go ahead, it is set to explode, labels are to yes, keep properties is to no. I go ahead and hit enter, and when it builds my surfaces, it didn't do what it was supposed to. Let's try that one more time. I'm just reorganizing. I got stuck in my surface. Good. There's my curves. I think I accidentally selected the surfaces rather than. Okay, so let's go back to have the surface. And the other thing, I might have selected the outer surface instead of the inner surface. I forget whether this had two surfaces or not. I know it did for the rendering. I just can't remember whether I still have it in this version of it or not. I think it's on that one. Okay, so I'm going to unroll surface again. I'm going to select the polysurface. There it is. Select curves on polysurface to unroll. I'm going to select all of these floors, but not the labels. There we go. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. Okay, so because I'm not getting the floors, they must not be coplanar with this particular surface. So I must have saved the slightly larger outer surface. So let me do another example. Bear with me for a second. I'm just quickly creating a new little box here. There we go. Okay, so let's say I have something like this, and let me use some planes, and I'm going to do these intersections here. Array. Number in X is 1, number in Y is 1, number in Z was 51. Z spacing was 12 feet. There we go, enter to accept. There we go. Get rid of the top one. Perfect. We'll go ahead and trim this. If I can type trim. Select this and this. One time. There we go. Okay, so sorry, quick recreation there. Let me do the unroll on this surface now. But before I do that, I need to get all of those floors to have their curves around them. So let me go to duplicate border, and let me select all of these except for the outer poly surface, and that gives me those curves, which is exactly what I wanted. And then I'm going to do an unroll surface of this surface. Oh, let me join it with this. So I have a closed poly surface. There we go. And now I'll do an unroll surface of this with the curves. Select the curve there. And now it unrolled every one of the floor curves. Right, see all those curves with each piece. So let me go ahead and move all of this stuff. Actually, what I really need to do is move this away. Why the layers make a difference. So I'm going to have a bunch of little curves that are left over here. Alright, there we go. Let me move these over to here. Perfect. So now I have all of my little objects here. And we can move these even more. Alright, moved. And let's start assembling. So obviously 1 and 1 can go together, so let me go ahead and move this to there. And this one's relatively easy because it was a straight, there aren't curving sides, so life is a little bit easier for me. Let me go ahead and move this to there, and let me move this one to there, and let me move this piece to there, and then we're going to rotate it there. And so those of you that have done 130 and you know about finding true lengths and that sort of thing, this makes life a whole lot easier. You don't have to do any true length calculations. It does it for you. The other factor in this is when I cut this out and I glue it together, this line that goes on an angle here is going to match up with this side once it's folded together. Right? So you didn't have to do any calculations. Not so spectacular on just a simple shape, but if you have something that's curving and you want those lines to line up, it becomes rather critical. So, if I were going to actually prepare this for laser cutting, let me do a layer here for laser cutting. Let me put it all the way down at the bottom. Perfect. You do a sub-layer for engrave and a sub-layer for cut. And I'm going to want to select all of the curves, but not the surfaces themselves. And I can change those to be on the engraved layer. And let me change, just so you can see it, let me change it to blue. Okay, so those are going to be ready. Oops, that was an extra. So those are ready to cut. Now, I also need the borders so that I can cut it out. So on each of these shapes, I'm going to duplicate border. It's going to give me a curve for the border. So let me go ahead and change object layer. And while I'm at it, we'll make that active and turn it red so you can see it. There it is. So let me go ahead and dupe border for each of these surfaces. So there, 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 and then I can turn everything off except for the laser cut layer so we can look at it. Okay, so we're very close. The only problem is we need to explode each of these and turn the middle ones to blue. Right? So let me take there, there, I should select all of them. Select objects and then explode. Perfect. Now there's some duplicates, so I have two curves on top of each other, so let's clean those up so I don't have curves on top of each other. Okay, so this needs to be on the engraved layer. This needs to be on the engraved layer. This needs to be on the engraved layer. These need to be on the, actually we can just delete them. And that one needs to be on the cut, or excuse me, that is the engraved layer. So now I have engraved lines. Oop, this one needs to be engraved too. Make sure there's not anything else underneath. And this one also needs to be engraved. So I'm thinking about what objects would need to be engraved so that they don't fall apart, right? And so now I have this basically ready to cut out. The only problem is it would be nice if I had a little bit of a tab or something to glue. So I'm going to do a few offsets. Let me go ahead and join a few of these lines together. And then let me go ahead and offset. And in this case, my distance is probably 12 feet-ish. And the only key on this is that I want to make sure that I don't have two tabs. So if I have a tab here, I'm not going to put one there, right? If I have a tab there, I'm not going to put one on this piece. Right? Those are going to all glue. Those are all going to glue, so we're in good shape. So we need a little bit of touch-up. So let me go ahead and touch up a few cut marks here. Actually, we probably shouldn't put one there. We'll instead put one down here. So it's a little bit of a mind game about where the various tabs are going to go. Right. So this will then become an engraved layer. If I can find it. Okay. Go ahead and cut there. And this one. This and this obviously have to become engraved layers. This and this become engraved. This and this become engraved. But we need an offset at the top here so that it will interlock as well. This will become an engrave. Now this is too much, so I can go ahead and trim that piece off. It will still glue together just fine. Even though I'm missing a little bit off of that piece, that's fine. So that's going to glue, that's going to glue. The what? It'll cut right here. Okay, so now I've gone through and I've thought about where the folds are, where the little tabs are, how this object will glue together. And now if I took this into, obviously it's not scale, but if I took this into the laser cutter and I went to cut it out, I could glue it together relatively easily. Okay, so I'm not asking you guys to have to go cut. I just want you to go through the experience of unrolling your surface and building something like this so that you could do it down the road. Right? If you guys take the 221 Architecture Studio, you'll want to do a bunch of rapid prototypes of little building shapes. This is a really easy, quick way of doing it. Okay. So for today, exercise 218, I'm asking you to produce basically what it looks like at the bottom, right? A little wireframe with your labels and one with your labels organized and flat. Okay? You'll make a print of each one of those, so you'll just go to File, Print, change the printer to Image File, and then we could change the, we can set the window to be a little bit tighter here. All right, print this to an image file. You'll post that. You'll also post the image of your skyscraper itself. So if I turn stuff back on here, all right, we could do a print of this, file, print, same thing. All right, well, it's already close enough. Right, I'll print that as well. Those are the two images you're going to post for exercise 218. Go back and reference exercise 217 if you haven't been able to get the HDRIs to work or what have you. Okay? Are there any questions about the HDRIs? No, not yet. Anyway, so I'm going to stop talking now, and you guys can start working through this progress. I will go get some of the sample models that have been cut, so that you guys can see what they look like and how they glue together. Okay.
I have a question on the unrolled surfaces.
Yeah.
You unrolled two surfaces from the same building, right? One using floors and.
Yeah, I think I deleted the original one that didn't have the floors on it and replaced it with the one with the floors.
I guess how did the two compare?
They're the same. Here, well, let's do it right now. So we'll do an unrolled surface without the curves, and we'll end up with the surfaces. Let me just move them over here. So I end up, it's the same, everything's the same here as it is here. The difference being that I don't have any of the floor lines that go across anymore.
Which would be engraved.
Which would be engraved in this one and not in this one. And so if you're trying to mimic like a skyscraper or something, it's nice to have all those floor lines. And could you manually go in and try to do it? Yeah. But it's a lot more accurate to have Rhino unroll them with you. And then you can just engrave them and it makes the process easier. So something like this, I could still duplicate the border in all of these pieces and get the cutouts. I just wouldn't have the lines that go horizontal and across.
So that's going to be scarred on the outside so it just looks like there's floors?
Exactly. Exactly. And actually it probably wouldn't be bad if I went over and laser cut this right now so you guys can see what I was talking about.
Are we printing both the surface and the floors or the
Yeah, no,
so
exactly. It's all open. No, what did you say?
Are we printing an image for both the surface and the floors for the exercise? Or?
For the exercise, I want you don't need to do both of these. I just want the 3D view and the, whether you do this or you do this, I want another unruled surface view. Okay, either of these is acceptable.
And what do you cut those out? Would you use cardboard for that or what?
No, I'd use something thinner. So something like a museum board, or like a 2-ply museum board, or even better, watercolor paper. Something like that, or Bristol, or something like that. Because if you use too thick a material, and I'll bring some over, it's really hard to glue them together. And so in an ideal world, using just a paper is going to work the nicest. Okay. I will, unless you guys have questions, I will go laser cut this just as the example of how it all comes together at the end.